You're listening to The Pump Fake. With your host, Jarrett Bailey.
All right, everybody, welcome into the latest edition of The Pump Fake. The NFL may be on a brief hiatus until training camp, but we are not. Jarrett Bailey with you as always. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, whether it be on YouTube or as a podcast. And yeah, today, starting the 32 teams in 32 days series going around the NFL and talking to an expert on those respective teams. And joining me today, who better than Sal Cappacio to talk about Buffalo Bills. It's good to see you, man. How are you?
I'm good. So is this the first one you're doing for 32 teams, 32 days?
First one of the year, yeah. So we do it every year, and yeah, you are numero uno for 2025, my friend. So
well, it just feels like back in my high school days, I was the leadoff hitter, so I'm leading off again. So there you go.
Leadoff hitter, former track coach as well.
I've done a lot in my life. Yeah, I was a athlete in high school, and I was a baseball, leadoff hitter, center fielder, wide receiver, punt returner. I was really good, but I was just too small to really play in college. And I really would love to have. So I went to Syracuse University. Definitely too small to play there. Probably could have played D3. But later in my life, because I just love sports so much, I started coaching. And yeah, I was a high school football coach for 10 years in Florida. Wow. And then I became, so I coached everything from quarterbacks, DBs, everything. But anyway, and then actually, because I was teaching at the time also to coach, I was the head girls track and field coach for 6 years, won 4 district titles. It was great. We had a great time. And I will always tell this Jared story. I was not the greatest track coach in the world, but what I did was recruit the heck out of the volleyball team and the basketball team. And I had the best athletes every time I showed up to a meet.
Right. That's great. Well, today, hopping into what, I feel like we say it every year at this point where, hey, it's going to be the year for the Buffalo Bills. This is going to be, finally the year they get over the hump. And I'm sure that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott and Josh Allen are all tired of answering that question and, saying that they think it's going to be that year. And they took a different approach to this offseason compared to ones in recent memory where very defensive-oriented, heavily focused, both in free agency and the draft. They draft 3 corners. They draft defensive line heavy. You bring in Joey Bosa on a 1-year deal as, the potential. I make like the closer in baseball reference with him, where if it works out really well, he can kind of be the guy who helps seal the deal at the end of big games. What did you make of their approach to everything this offseason? And, could this be what helps push them over the top?
Yeah, I think, Jared, what's important to note is kind of going back a year ago. This offseason was really set up last offseason. And what I mean by that is, if you remember last year, a lot of people might not remember, but you're like, oh, yeah, that's right. They cut. Now, obviously, he's back Tre'Davious White. They cut Tre'Davious White. Micah Hyde had, basically retired. He came back in the practice squad later. Jordan Poyer. Gabe Davis left in free agency. Stephon Diggs was traded, obviously. Sure. Mitch Morse. I mean, they kind of ripped the Band-Aid off, so to speak, a year early. They knew they were kind of having this, okay, we have this really great quarterback. At some point, we're going to have to pay him even more than what he's getting paid. We have a lot of young guys and core guys that we're going to have to pay down the road whose contracts are going to be coming up soon. And then you had some aging veterans. So they kind of said last year, let's do that now so that we can get ahead of it. And a lot of people thought last year would be the step back year for the Bills, to be quite honest with you. And it wasn't, right? I mean, they go out and they win the AFC East. They get to the AFC Championship game. I think in a lot of ways it kind of maybe surprised if you think about what you were thinking of them going into the season. They weren't even the Bills weren't even the AFC East favorites going into the season.
Everybody and their mother was saying, "Oh, the Jets are it's going to be the Jets year. The Dolphins are finally going to get over the top." And
so the Bills have the surprising year, kind of in a lot of ways. So this year kind of was already the groundwork was laid for that. And what I mean is yes, they signed Bosa, and we can talk about that. But really what they did, the planning of locking up their core young players this offseason, that was the plan. They've signed a bunch of guys to extensions. Now, yes, Josh had 2 years left. Not like he's going to go anywhere, but you had to kind of make him whole. He's the league MVP. He was making maybe, I think, 10 to 12 best money in the league for a quarterback. You had to kind of put him up in that stratosphere, and they did that.
And they get ahead of that next core of guys who's going to be,
100%.
Jaden, Caleb, CJ Stroud. They get ahead of all of that. So it was a smart move.
No doubt. And then, but the real big ones, though, were they signed Khalil Shakir to a 4-year extension. Now, all these guys were going into the final year of their deal. They would have been under contract for 2025. There were really 5 of them. Now, I'm going to count Greg Rousseau. He was on the 5th-year option, but same thing. He had 1 year left. They signed Greg Rousseau, 4-year extension. Khalil Shakir, 4-year extension. Terrell Bernard, 4-year extension. Christian Benford, 4-year extension. You get the theme here. Yeah. James Cook's the only one left. Haven't done him yet. We'll see where that goes. But what they've really done, Jared, is they've kind of gone to the next iteration of this team. And yes, they haven't gotten over the hump. Or no, they haven't gotten over the hump. We know that. The Bills are going to keep swinging. I think what they've done here, it's clear. The Bills know they have about 5 years left of Josh Allen in his prime. They've locked all these guys up to say, we're going to try and win a Super Bowl, at least one, in the next 5 years. This is their 5-year swing. This is what they're doing starting this year. Yeah,
and Brandon Beane talked about it in terms of, everybody saying that they need a star receiver. They need a star receiver. And clearly he got annoyed about that.
Yeah. On our radio station, which, by the way, and we can recognize it. We can own it. It's we are the flagship station, WGR sure. Sports Radio 550. And, the day after the draft, our morning show host, Jeremy White and Joe DiBiase. I think, that clip went viral. And look, I understand Brandon's point of view. I do. I also understand the question from Jeremy, which we've always talked about, which is, do the Bills believe in spending the kind of resources at that position that other teams spend? And they kind of haven't done that. They signed Khalil Shakir. He's their number one, right?
Yeah, quote unquote.
He's not Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. Sure. They gave him $58 million. That's not incredible money for a 4-year extension. And look, Brandon Beane kind of admitted, you can't have, what did he say? You can't have all pros at every position.
Yeah.
And because they have Josh Allen, it rises everybody up. But at the same time, he's right. Hey, guys, we had the same kind of philosophy last year. We scored 30 points a game, set records.
Yeah, and completely fair. And even going back to the combine, I can't remember who asked, but, he had made the joke all right, yeah, you guys always say, I don't draft fast receivers or I don't draft receivers or anything like that. So even going as far back as that, where it's he completely recognizes that that's what people had kind of been wanting, but it's completely fair to make the point. And he made it himself, when they went to the Super Bowl in Carolina and he was there, they were doing it with Ted Ginn and Philly Brown and Devin Funchess. It was, Cam Newton's great year and a solid defense that they rode there. So I get his point of view from all of that. You brought up James Cook. Yes or no? Does the deal get done? Does he stay in Buffalo long-term, in your opinion?
I don't think a deal gets done before the end of this coming season. I think James Cook plays on the final year of his deal, and then we'll see where it goes. So I wouldn't rule out him staying in Buffalo long-term, but I think that has to happen maybe after this year. Now, I would say I'm a little bit more thinking it could get done than I was a few weeks ago. And the reason is he did show up to mandatory minicamp. A lot of people thought maybe he wouldn't do that, make a statement. Maybe that's a good faith measure. Maybe there's something going on behind the scenes. Brandon Beane is great with the media, but he does not talk about that kind of stuff with the media. And he keeps it very close to the vest. And something he said, though, kind of made me go, that's interesting. He said, we expect James to be, at training camp with or without a new deal. And that's the kind of first time he's acknowledged that it could have even opened the door to a new deal. Because if you go back to the owners' meetings, we sat with Brandon Beane, Jarrett, and he said, hey, all these other guys, remember the guys I told you about?
Yeah.
When we realized that, we weren't going to get something done with James, we pivoted. So, and then he used the words next year when talking about James Cook deal. So to me, that was like,
that, those talks were shelved for the time being.
Yes, exactly. So I wouldn't completely rule it out, but from my standpoint, just kind of reading the way everything's gone here, I think James comes to training camp, he plays his butt off, plays on the final year of his deal. And then look, if you still have the transition tag, the franchise tag, you have other levers if you need to try to make those things happen. If you want to keep him in Buffalo, Bills want to, there's a narrative, I guess, out there that, the Bills don't want to sign James Cook. They do. Yeah. They just have a difference in value for what he thinks he's worth and what they think he's worth.
And this happens every year around the league where, especially at this position, I think as of late, and I think kind of the Le'Veon Bell contract situation really set the mold for what running backs do now. But yeah, showing up to mandatory minicamp, I think good move on his part, and hopefully we'll see something get done on their end. Let's talk about the receivers that they currently have, though. I think signing Elijah Moore after the draft quietly, like a very good signing. Had a really nice year last year in Cleveland, even though, nobody talked about it because the Browns won 3 games. He's not exactly a household name, but still 61 catches a year ago. Plugging him into a wide receiver room that, needs to replace the production of Mac Hollins. I think that there could be, we could be talking around week 9 of Elijah Moore being the number 2 receiver on the team, and I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be stunned either. I think right now he's probably number 4 or 5, but only because of the way you slot guys and who's been in the system, who's been with Josh Allen. I will tell you, I was very impressed with Elijah Moore at OTAs and minicamp. I thought him and Josh had a chemistry right away. He actually brings a skill set the Bills kind of lack in their offense, right? He's a guy down the field who can get some separation. They don't really have that. Khalil Shakir is just a great route runner. He's not a super fast guy, but he's going to find his way to get open in a lot of ways. Keon Coleman can get down the field, but a little different, right? He's got the long strides. He's got the high point ability. He's not running away from defenders, but he still can get separation in his own way. Curtis Samuel's a guy you can kind of use all around the offense. You can hand him the ball. You can do a lot of different things. He does actually have speed. And then Joshua Palmer, actually another really good route runner. I think underrated on the outside what he can do. Elijah Moore is a little bit more of the, okay, you need a big play. Elijah Moore can get down the field. What I saw from him in OTAs and minicamp was exactly that. He was really in the mid-range area was what he was doing really well for them. I wouldn't be surprised if he moves up the depth chart. The Bills have this, what they call everybody eats mentality. And it's not just production. It's not just numbers. It's, you have to do your role. It's kind of like the whole Bill Belichick do your job. The Bills, it's 1/11th. And when you're a receiver, hey, you're going to be asked to block. You're going to be asked to run short routes, get the ball in your hands early. You're going to be asked to run deep, whatever. And that's kind of their philosophy. So they don't have kind of one go-to guy. And I think Elijah Moore will fit right in with that. It's funny you bring up Mac Hollins and the replacement. It's amazing to think about, Jarrett. Elijah Moore has never had a year any worse than Mac Hollins' year last year. Like Mac Hollins, crazy. Where he topped out last year, Elijah Moore has always cleared that bar.
Yep.
And that's wild to think about for the Bills, even though now Mac did lead the Bills in receiving touchdowns last year. But Elijah Moore comes in a little bit more different than a lot of these guys that are veteran with like the pedigree he has actually been pretty productive.
Yeah. How much of that is Mac just being like a folk hero in the NFL? I think a lot of that has to do with like the quirkiness and also plays his butt off, special teams, run blocking, like very good player that fits a niche role that, I think Buffalo will miss to a degree. And you said the everybody eats. I mean, the replacing the run blocking and whatnot, I think that's just going to be by committee when it comes with Mac Hollins. What are the odds that Tyrell Shavers gets a roster spot this year? He's been kind of a fringe guy for the past couple of years.
Tyrell, I really love him, and I've written about him a little bit lately. He's right there. To me, he's number 6 receiver. I just don't know if they keep 6 receivers. Yeah. I think that's the question, right? Is he number 6? So, at this point, third year in, do you keep him on the practice squad again? I think the Bills would love that. But if you're Tyrell Shavers, at some point you may say, I want another opportunity, right? If you get waived, and you say, well, there's another team that wants me out there. The dude last year, I really thought he might lock down that last receiver spot on the roster. He didn't get it. He goes to the practice squad. He's there all year. And what happens? Gets in one game, gets one touch, and has a 69-yard touchdown. The only touch in his NFL career. Why isn't this guy playing, right? I mean, that's so good for Tyrell Shavers. So we'll see what happens. For all the talk about what Brandon Beane said, what you and I just talked about with the top of the Bills depth chart, right? The top of the Bills depth chart, there's not that true number 1, as we said. Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Josh Palmer. But holy cow. I mean, at the bottom, Tyrell Shavers, Jalen Virgil, KJ Hamler, right? I mean, like these are guys, Laviska Shenault, who's more of a kick returner, but they actually probably have better 5, 6, and 7 number wide receivers than most teams in the league, to be quite honest.
If it were a hockey lineup where they went 3-3-3-3, you'd be hard pressed to find anybody with a deeper wide receiver room than the Bills right now in terms of just overall talent. Defensively, I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit.
Can I just make one point before we move on?
Absolutely.
I think lost in all of this because the everybody eats is the tight end room and Dalton Kincaid.
Oh, of course.
And he really factors into everything we're talking about because, I hate how we frame this sometimes, but don't think of him as a tight end, right? It's kind of like a joke a little bit, but it's true. He's not a true tight end. He's a flex tight end. He catches a lot of passes, and they're really expecting a big year 3 jump because year 2 didn't happen quite the way they thought because of a lot of injuries. But like Dalton Kincaid figures into all of this stuff that we're talking about, even though we don't look at him on paper as WR wide receiver. For the Bills, I always say, don't think of WR and TE, think of pass catchers. That's what they are in this offense.
Is he the Bills' offensive player under the most pressure this year?
It's either him or Keon Coleman. It's either him or Keon Coleman. And I think with Keon, because of the trade, Xavier Worthy, because the Bills haven't invested a first-round pick and they went down and got him in the top of the second round, that might elevate him a little bit more. Because that's not his, right? That's circumstance around him. For Dalton, for sure, because he was a first-round pick. Mm-hmm. He didn't have that year 2 breakout a lot of people expected, although he was number 2 in the team, I think, in targets and catches, whatever. I have to look back, but he missed some games. So I think Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid are both kind of right there as far as they need a guy. One of those guys has to have a big leap, and the Bills are hoping both of them do.
Let's talk about Dawson Knox real quick, actually, too, because I know that he's, in terms of cap hits, I want to say in 2026, he has one of the bigger ones on the team. Mm-hmm. Is there a restructure happening there that could keep him there long term, or is this maybe his last hoorah?
I would say a restructure could very well happen with Dawson because the Bills love him so much. Yeah. I battle with people that explain, and I knew just from talking with people about this, but people would tell me all the time in January, February, well, Dawson Knox can get cut. Look at that cap hit. I'm like, look, I'm not saying his cap hit is a little high, right? I get that, but they're not moving on from Dawson Knox. Yeah. They love Dawson Knox. In fact, at the end of the season press conference, when we talked with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, Sean was asked a question, something like, who's a guy on the team that really, kind of has been really there for you and glue, and Dawson Knox, the guy said. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you hear a coach just single a guy like that, he said something like, people don't realize what he does for us, right? When you hear a coach talk like that, like that he's such a core player for you. And listen, he actually was really, really, he was a quality, serviceable tight end when they needed him to be without Dalton Kincaid last year. Mm-hmm. He's always been a guy who can do a little bit of everything. He's not great at anything, but he's really good at a lot of things.
I love that. Let's move on to the defense then. Yeah. I think the Dalton Kincaid of the Bills defense in terms of guy who needs to have a big bounce back is Ed Oliver. Had a few games down the stretch, especially against Detroit in that shootout game where we saw a little bit of like, oh, there's, why they paid Ed Oliver.
Yep.
But for the most part in the year, a little bit of a down year, I would say, for him. Added a lot of talent next to him. Was all of these defensive line additions, with the thought process of, okay, this can help elevate Ed Oliver, or is it with the thought process of, okay, if Ed doesn't, play well, this could be used to replace Ed Oliver?
I think down the road, you could have that conversation. They did restructure his deal last year. So, he's on the team this year. You're right. I would say inconsistency is the word I would use for Ed Oliver. And, Ed's an undersized defensive tackle, right? I mean, he needs a bigger bodied guy next to him eating some guys up so he can do his thing. His thing is penetration. That's what he is. Ed Oliver's a penetrator. He's not a 2-gap controller. It's not what he is. You want him to play upfield, and it's a penetrating defense. If you go back to 2023, the first 5 games of the year, the Bills then go to London. That's when they lose Matt Milano for the year, and that's when they lose Daquan Jones for almost the year. He came back later. There was a noticeable difference in Ed Oliver the first 5 games with Daquan next to him than after Daquan got hurt. So Daquan comes back last year, and he wasn't quite the same player. I don't know if just the injury of the pec, he's getting a little older, whatever. But we all thought, okay, Daquan's back. Ed Oliver is going to be kind of that same guy we saw the first 4 or 5 games. Ed Oliver was playing, I would argue, maybe an all-pro level the first 4 games of the year in 2023. Daquan gets hurt, and Ed kind of has a drop-off, and then last year it never bounced back. You're 100% right. You have to see more of what you saw in Detroit that game. We saw it in Houston a couple of years ago in a game he played, I think it was, or in Dallas, maybe it was on Thanksgiving a few years ago, that big Josh Allen game. But those games have been not enough for the Bills. They need more from Ed Oliver. So the answer to your question about helping on the D-line, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's, hey, we really need to kind of help our really great penetrating undersized defensive tackle who's got a lot of talent by putting some bigger bodies next to him. And you go out and you draft Deion Walker and you get TJ Sanders, right? And you have these guys, and Daquan's still on the team, but also there's a new kind of core defensive tackle group for the Bills that if in a year or two, if Ed Oliver's not on the team, this is your next group that you're putting in there.
Yeah. My good buddy, Matt Verderame, who, big Chiefs guy, writes for Sports Illustrated. The point that he always makes with Buffalo is if they can get to the quarterback, especially, in a big game against Kansas City, I think they'll win. If they can't, I think the Chiefs will win. Do they have enough firepower now with, Landon Jackson now coming in, obviously Joey Bosa, Rousseau still there. It really feels like they took a lot of swings because they know that they need one of these guys to hit.
They do, and we thought for the last 2 years they had that, and for a lot of times they did. Then you get in those critical games and they don't get to Patrick Mahomes again. They don't get to Joe Burrow a couple years ago in the snow. It's just, it has not hit in those critical games. And Matt is 100% right. Absolutely. It has come down to not getting to the quarterback in these playoff games the Bills have lost. That's totally what it is. You can look at, sure, there's been some run defense issues. There's been a couple drop passes, right? They haven't gotten to the quarterback, and they need to do that in these critical games. So the question is, can a guy like Landon Jackson come in and have an impact kind of right away? Well, I don't know if he can, how often he's going to be on the field with Greg Rousseau and Joey Bosa and AJ Epinesa, right? I mean, like, these are guys already that are entrenched in the team, but there is a rotation the Bills use as well. The Bills are very heavy as a rotation on the defensive line. Joey Bosa, honestly, Jarrett, the question with him is availability. He's already hurt. I mean, he's got a calf injury. We didn't see him at all during OTAs or minicamp. And like, for this guy, for all the injuries he's had, can you really count on Joey Bosa even being on the field and being that guy? There's both these things are right, but the two reactions from Bills fans when Joey Bosa was hurt was, number one, well, here we go again. It's Joey Bosa. You should have never signed him. And I get it. Like, that's absolutely the situation that he's been in the last few years. The other reaction is, who cares? Put him in bubble wrap until the playoffs, right? I mean, like, we don't need him until the playoffs. Let him get as healthy as possible. So I think the question with Joey Bosa is really going to come down to availability. One guy I'll give you that I think the Bills like that could be a little sneaky play here is second-year player Javon Solomon. Javon Solomon was drafted in the 5th round last year out of Troy. He actually led the FBS in sacks from Troy his senior year, and he set like some records there. And this is where DeMarcus Ware went, Osi Umenyiora went, and when you have that kind of production in college at that position, not always, but a lot of times it does translate to guys who can get to the quarterback in the NFL. It's such a critical spot. He's a little bit undersized, but I think that's a guy. Now, the other part of this, the Bills signed Michael Hoyt, who they really think can help him. He's suspended 6 games. Same thing with Larry Ogunjobi on the defensive line, going back to that. That's a guy that can help at Oliver and everybody else. These guys are suspended 6 games. They cannot play with the team for 6 games once the season starts for PED suspensions from what had happened before they had signed them, basically. I don't know how it's going to shake out when Hoyt is out, once Hoyt returns, as far as the numbers, as far as the rotation, how many guys can you keep? But man, like, that first 6 games, they're going to have to find a way to get to the quarterback without a couple of guys who are going to help them get to the quarterback later, hopefully.
I'll look at it from the flip side of that coin, and I'll say Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi will come in very fresh into week 7. And now you've got, basically half the year where they didn't have to have wear and tear on their bodies, and you can really utilize them in the build-up for the playoffs. So that could end up being somewhat of a blessing in disguise. I said the same thing last year with Matt Milano. It was like, it's going to stink not having him until, week 14 or whenever they got him back. But not a lot of wear and tear on the body after that, and he's going to be fresh for the postseason. So,
and you were right. I would say the thing with Matt, and here's the difference between those guys and why you're probably right about them. Matt might have needed a couple more weeks to really get to where he was, because he was really on a nice trajectory, right? And then he actually tweaked his hammy at the end of the Ravens game, and he wasn't full throttle for the AFC Championship. But if Matt had maybe a couple more weeks, he might have been back to what we know Matt Milano to be.
Absolutely. Secondary wise, obviously Max Hairston, the shiny new toy, playing opposite of Christian Benford. Taron Johnson still there in the slot. The Kyer Elam swing and miss, I mean, has been kind of looming large over the franchise in terms, especially after, the result of the AFC Championship game where he had to go, and because Benford got hurt, didn't play well, they sent him to Dallas. So Max Hairston, there's some lofty expectations there. He, suffered a small injury as well during minicamp, but he's good to go. Is that correct?
Yeah, everybody is. There's quite a few guys who missed the week of mandatory minicamp, but Brandon Beane, when I asked him specifically, are you concerned about any of these guys, missing the start of training camp? He said, knock on wood, and he knocked on his own head and said, I think that everybody's going to be okay. So that's good. Yeah, Max Hairston had a little tweak of the hammy, but he looked good. He was out on the field with his teammates walking in. Anyway, so real quick on Kyer, I think they really tried to fit a square peg into a round hole. I think the Bills that year really wanted Trent McDuffie, and the Chiefs surprised them by, there you go, the Chiefs, right? Doing it again. Surprised them by trading up and getting McDuffie. And I think the Bills kind of said, okay, well, who's the next guy on our board? It never really worked. It wasn't really the guy they wanted originally, but they felt good. You wouldn't take him if you didn't. It just never hit with Kyer. And, yes, that's definitely something that's hurt this organization as a first-round pick that just never was able to really see the field. Now, that said, I will remind everybody, Christian Benford was drafted in the 6th round out of
Yeah.
Villanova that year. So it's kind of like if you reverse spots, it wouldn't have mattered, right? I mean, you still get the guy that goes in, and now he's on a contract extension. Max Hairston has all of the traits, all the tools. The Bills need to get faster and twitchier at corner. That's exactly what he is. I mean, the guy ran a sub 4.3 combine, 40
fastest at the combine.
Yeah, that's right. He was. And he's got ball skills. He's a little smaller. He's not super physical. You got to be a little physical in this defense. I think those are things that he's going to have to kind of really learn at the NFL level. Speaking of Tyrell Shavers, twice during OTAs and minicamp, I saw Max Hairston have great coverage on Tyrell Shavers, and Tyrell still caught the ball because he's longer and he's more physical. And that's the kind of thing Max Hairston is going to have to really kind of adjust to in the NFL. Like, man, that didn't happen in college. I had great coverage on that guy. Why didn't I catch it? I still think when they go to camp, I think Tre'Davious White is the corner opposite Christian Benford. I think Max Hairston will have every opportunity to win that job, but they're very comfortable, I think, with Tre'Davious White as their starter right now. And he knows the system. This is a team that's trying to win a Super Bowl. I don't think they're going to experiment, right? They're not going to put a guy out there that they're going to be risky. The big word with Sean McDermott is trust. He's got to trust you if you're going to play in his defense. And I think right now, Tre'Davious White's the guy that would trust. We'll see how that goes. You know, he's only 30. It feels like he's a lot older than that. He's coming off those 2 injuries from a couple of years ago and, you know, back-to-back ACL, Achilles. But I think that's the play there. And then I think like the Dalton Kincaid, Keon Coleman guy on the defensive side to me is Cole Bishop. The 2nd-round safety that missed most of training camp last year.
Yeah.
He had a lot of runway to try to win that job. He didn't do that. DeMar Hamlin starts, and honestly, DeMar actually played pretty well all year, but he's just not quite the athlete or the ball hawk, and he just gives you a baseline play, which is nice and steady, but they need more out of that position, and I think they need it from Cole Bishop, and he was hurt during minicamp. And if Cole Bishop can't get on the field, that's a 2nd-round pick that you really believe in that can help you that has not hit yet. But if he can get on the field and he can play to the capabilities of what they want, I think they're looking at a really good safety tandem, possibly of Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop.
Outside of Max Hairston, they also brought in 2 different corners in the draft, and Jordan Hancock and Dorian Strong. Yeah. Again, really addressing hey, we need to get deeper. We need to, make sure that if something goes wrong, we've got guys that we can rely on. What did those 2 guys look like up close and personal, in your opinion?
Yeah, this is what happens when you have everybody on the offense returning except for maybe Mac Hollins, right? Yeah. I mean, they really, honestly, I've never seen anything like this, Jarrett. The Bills on offense have every single one of their starting and backup offensive linemen returning, right?
That's pretty incredible.
That's pretty incredible. Have a good offensive line, by the way. And tight ends and running backs. They have the exact same running back room, the exact same quarterback room. It's incredible.
No, we didn't even talk about Ray Davis and Ty Johnson. My goodness.
Yeah, right. But because of everything's the same. So anyway, on the defensive side, Dorian Strong looks like an NFL corner. He actually looks bigger than a normal NFL corner. He is a physical specimen at that spot. And I love the fact. So his dad did some research. His dad is a competitive weightlifter and bodybuilder. So you know where this kid's bloodlines are coming from, right? I mean, like he's physical. He loves to play a little bit of man-to-man. I think the Bills will play a little bit more man-to-man this year. They hired Mike Pellegrino from the Patriots to help out in their secondary when they lost Scott Booker to the Patriots. The Patriots under Belichick, he worked with him for many years. They've really morphed. They were man-to-man a lot. They were zone a lot. I think we'll see more of that. So I think he'll fit in right there. But this is a guy that's going to have to be really a really good special teams player. We know he's probably not going to be on the field right away, and he'll probably be a spot duty type of corner, come in because of injury. They signed Dane Jackson back. He had left the team for a couple of years for, a free agent contract. A guy that started a lot of games for the team. And even in the playoffs, he's played pretty well. Again, baseline. I think the thing with the Bills that did this year in the draft with all these guys was they kind of swung a little bit more. The Bills have always drafted for the floor and said, we're going to have guys that we need a guy to come in. He can give us a baseline play. We know we can trust him. I think the Bills swung more in this draft. It could be real risky, Max Hairston, right? But you could get more out of it. And then Jordan Hancock's interesting. Jordan Hancock is both a nickel corner and a safety. The Bills have a guy who's already both a nickel corner and a safety. That's Cam Lewis, who's been on the team from the University of Buffalo, undrafted free agent, now going to his 8th year, which is amazing. He's been really, really important for them. They're going to have to figure out where Jordan Hancock fits best. Is he a nickel corner? Is he a safety? They're going to train him at both spots, figure that out. And it might really come down to, hey, we could have Cam Lewis at one of these and have him at the other instead of having maybe them battling for one versatile position.
And also Jamarcus Ingram's still there as well. So you got to figure out a bunch of different stuff.
By the way, think about that. The University at Buffalo, The Bills have Cam Lewis, Jamarcus Ingram, and Joe Andreessen, who, by the way, I think had a fantastic spring as the backup middle linebacker.
I love it. Sal Cappacio, my friend. Well, we've done it. Before I let you go, finish this sentence for me. The Buffalo Bills win the Super Bowl if
they get the 1 seed.
Okay.
Something they have not done in this era is get the 1 seed. They have not had the ability to have the first week off and then 2 home games. In the year that the NFL realigned to 7 playoff teams instead of 6 was the first year the Bills would have had a bye in the 2 seed, but because they changed it, they've never had the bye.
Wow.
And because of that, a couple of years ago, they had a bunch of injuries in that first game. Playing that first game matters a lot, right? And then being at home, obviously, in the AFC Championship, which they haven't been able to do that because they haven't had the 1 seed. And Jarrett, I mean, I don't know how much you and your audience are aware of, talked about it in any capacity because it's more of a local story, but this is the final year of Highmark Stadium. There's a new stadium going in across the street. And, you know, we've talked a lot on the radio about what the final year looks like. Yes, there's a scheduled final game against the Jets, but if that's the last game, then something truly went wrong with the Buffalo Bills this year. The storybook ending is you play the AFC Championship, you win it, the final game at Highmark Stadium.
Even as a Steelers fan, you know, anybody who watches this show and, you know, follows the written work, they know I'm a very big Josh Allen apologist, and I pray to Joshua Patrick Allen before bed every night. So the Bills and the fan base have kind of adopted me in a very sweet way. So I have a lot of love for that team and that quarterback, and a lot of love for you, my friend, for giving me some time today. I appreciate you very much. Where can everybody find you, especially as the NFL season gets closer?
Well, at Sal Sports over on any social media platform, and that includes Twitter or Blue Sky or Facebook. But also on YouTube at Sal Sports. Myself and Matt Bove, who's the sports director here at the ABC affiliate, Channel 7, we do the podcast It's Always Game Day in Buffalo, and that's part of our Odyssey family because I'm a host on WGR Sports Radio 550 and on the Bills Sidelines. But at Sal Sports, you can find all that content. You can go and watch and listen.
I love it. All right, everybody. If you were watching this on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe. If you're listening as a podcast, leave a review, and we'll talk soon on the Pump Fake.